Hello everyone. We're going to be continuing with our series on World War I, starting with the real beginning of the conflict. There are two fronts in this war, predominantly, a Western Front and an Eastern Front. And Germany has a plan for how they're going to start and what they thought was going to be a quick end to the war. They were going to leave a token force to defend the Eastern Front, and then focus the majority of their forces on defeating the French on the Western Front. There was a general named Schlieffen who comes up with this plan to sweep in with multiple armies and defeat the French, much like they had in the Franco-Prussian War, with a swift, what's called the Blitzkrieg strike, utilizing the railroads that have been built and coming in extremely quickly, lots of artillery, hitting really hard, taking a note of Napoleon's playbook there. This war calls for a two-front war, like I said. They leave a small force to hold off the Russian advance, while the majority invades France. Problem being, one of them is this plan calls for coming through neutral Belgium. Now, Belgium, they do put up token resistance, and it says here that they're swept aside, but any slowing of Germany's advance gave the Allies on the other side time to, rally their forces and really fight against the Germans as they're coming through. Okay, they're going to move quickly along the Belgian coastal area, sweep down into northern France, and try and take Paris, circumventing a lot of the French's defenses that they had on the German border, and attack Paris from behind. It's actually a very good plan. One of the problems being that attacking through Belgium gives England not only an excuse to attack Germany because of the alliance that they had with France, but also because they were attacking a neutral country. The plan is also that after France is defeated, Germans will then focus on Russia. And here is the Schlieffen plan. Okay, so you've got Belgium up here, you've got northern France, and the plan is to sweep down, take all the main cities, including Paris. And this was embarrassing for me in the first video. I was like pointing to Paris over here because I was stressed out and couldn't find it. But Paris is actually right there. And they're going to be sweeping down through Belgium, Luxembourg, etc., taking all these major cities in France and swiftly securing it. French forces push back as the Germans head towards Paris, though, and the Germans are not able to get to Paris and conquer France quickly, like they had planned on. The Germans were in a hurry. They made a lot of careless mistakes. They overextended their supply lines, even though they had the railroads, etc. They get ahead of themselves, and they end up really, fighting it out at the First Battle of Marne, and this starts the whole trench warfare thing in World War I. In September 1914, the French reorganized with fierce fighting, began to push the Germans back. The French filled Paris taxicabs with troops and move them to meet the German advance. Like, they are using any means possible to get soldiers to the front to fight the Germans. And the French do push the Germans back, and it's a key victory because it slows the German advance down, which leads to the first battle of, I can never remember how to pronounce this, Ypres? Yep, I think so, I don't know. Okay, mid-October to mid-November. And I apologize if you can hear my dog whining in the background. Germany next tried to reach the English Channel and cut off Allied supply lines. This is one of the main reasons why England started their arms race, is because Germany was building up a navy, and so they built up their military forces as well to compete, because England is an island. They were stopped in Belgium as a battle lasted a month long. By late November 1914, the war is reached a deadlock. Neither side could gain over the other, and they start digging trenches. And the battlefield stretched from Belgium to neutral Switzerland and lasted 3.5 years and was 450 miles long. So the front is over 450 miles long. So if you think about the state of California, I mean, that's what, 2/3 of the way down California is a line where you've got men in trenches shooting at each other for 450 miles. I mean, it was pretty crazy. It was then, it is now. Here again, that's another picture of the Schlieffen plan, and plan to sweep through France doesn't end up working out like they had originally planned. So this is the line in northern France that you end up with. That dotted line there is the maximum German advance. I apologize that the quality of this picture isn't very, very good. Here's the front line, winter 1914-15, and basically it's this area here that's contested the entire war on the Western Front, and the Eastern line kind of mirrors this. You have soldiers gaining a few yards one way and gaining a few yards the other way, maybe a mile or two, but it's, for the majority of the war, it's pretty static. Okay, there's where Ypres actually is. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, and I apologize. Okay, and so here you see the battle lines. Okay, you see the front lines for the Germans, I believe, are in red, and French I believe are in blue here, and they are just fighting over just a little bit of territory basically the entire time that this war carries on. Okay, the Eastern Front. So this is Germany versus Russia now. So to Germany's surprise, the Russian attacked much sooner than expected. So the Russians had been building up their military since the I cannot remember what that conflict was. The Russo-Japanese War, I believe, is what it is called, where the Russians were very much defeated and embarrassed. Asia at this time was not considered a center of real global power, and so when Russia loses to one of the Asian nations, they're kind of looked down upon by their European counterparts, and they want to compensate for that. So during this 10-year period prior to World War I, they'd really been ramping things up, and they went on the offensive much earlier than the Germans ever anticipated. So two huge Russian armies moved deep into German territory to East Prussia. However, they got separated in marshes and forests, and gave Germany the chance they needed to encircle one of them, tear it to pieces, the Battle of Tannenberg, chase the other out of Prussia. Russia took a severe beating. In this war and the Second World War, Russia is one of the biggest losers as far as casualties are concerned. Russia loses a lot of people in these wars, and then also, as we get to the next unit, talking about totalitarian regimes, to Stalin and his regime as well, and then the October Revolution. We'll get there. Okay. The German victories made heroes of the German commanders to the east, Paul von Hindenburg. And this is something to know. The Germans used these, what they call aces, or these generals that won great victories, as pieces of propaganda for their nation. You might have heard of the Red Baron, who was an actual person. I can't remember his real name right now, but he was a combat ace in World War One. Flew a combat plane and shot down a lot of people. There was a number of these individuals who, had great success in this war and then in World War II as well. And that was a tactic used by the Germans as propaganda to try and keep morale up. Meanwhile, in Austria-Hungary, they ended in 1914. They attacked Serbia 3 times and are beaten back each time. Russia suffers defeat by Germans to the north. They're capturing territory from Austria-Hungary in the south. And so they're losing money or territory up here and, gaining it here, and vice versa. And so while the lines are changing as far as the geography is concerned as the war progresses, essentially, like, the territory kind of remains relatively static in total size. I mean, there is wins, there is losses on both sides, but as the war drags on, we'll see it becomes more of a war of attrition. So you see the Germans in red, and then you've got the Russians in blue, and they're maintaining these lines and holding each other at bay. Whereas you've got the Russians coming in quickly, they're being fended off, etc. And you end up with things like this, where people start to dig in holes. And this is kind of early trench warfare, where they're just setting these things up. And I mean, it's good tactics, to be quite honest with you, to dig down so it's easier for you to stay alive and harder for the enemy to kill you, while at the same time you have clear line of sight and you're able to shoot at them. Okay, other fighting. Great Britain, unable to do much on land, except send supplies to the French, uses the overwhelming naval power to block Germany from the Atlantic Ocean. The German Navy ends up remaining trapped in their own ports, except for one exception: submarines. Submarines were absolutely terrifying. There was, in this war and the Second World War, there were few things that sea captains feared more than submarines. I had a great uncle, before he passed away. He'd tell us stories. He was a naval captain in World War II, and he'd tell us stories about how he was on a merchant marine vessel transporting supplies, and his type of ship was one of the main targets for submarines in World War II. And it was this constant fear of, as you're sailing, that you could be sunk at any time. And there was this fear of death that is constantly looming over you the entire voyage. And submarines were less in this war, they were less of a huge strategic asset that's going to completely win the war for you. In the Second World War, it could have been that if Hitler had focused on it. But submarines were a weapon of terror for anyone who was sailing at this time. And in World War I, there's really no easy way to stop them. Depth charges and stuff like that they had in World War II, the technology is just not there in World War I to compete with these things. Germany used their U-boat ships to slip under British blockade and destroy supply ships. And if you destroy the supplies, armies run on their stomachs. And if you've got 1 million people on a war front and they're not getting any food, they're not going to be doing very well. Okay? And the war spreads. Japan ends up declaring war on Germany in August 1914, takes several islands in the Pacific that Germany had colonized for coaling stations. Australia and New Zealand did the same thing. Fighting breaks out all over Africa. By 1915, British troops had pushed Germans completely out of Africa, except for Tanzania. And this is when we're talking about a World War II. Predominantly, people focus on the Eastern and Western fronts in Europe. But I just want to point this out, that this is actually a world war. There is fighting going on all over the place. And it really, really was a world war. Okay, German U-boats. So you've got old school German U-boat, 35 people, and then a modern submarine, powered by nuclear reactors. This is diesel and electric motors. It's more primitive technology, but 6 torpedoes can potentially sink 6 ships every single time they head out in the water. And naval vessels are insanely expensive for a nation to produce and maintain and uphold and train crews for, etc. So every single time the British lost it, or any nation lost a ship to one of these things, it was hugely devastating to them. New weapons. Both sides are developing new weapons, and some of them are absolutely terrifying and terrible, and they completely change the way that war is waged all over the world. New invention, the airplane in 1903, is now carrying bombs and machine guns, and the United States Air Force doesn't exist in this war. I mean, it's air forces around the world don't exist. They're part of other, military branches and things like that. And warfare via aircraft is really just being developed for the first time, and it adds a completely different layer and dimension to warfare that has never existed before. Before this, everything is fought either on the ground or at sea, and that's it. And so it adds a whole new layer of combat that had never existed before, and really complicates things. During World War I, the tank is invented by the British to try and break through the trenches and push forward to rip through barbed wire across the trenches, and to provide a mobile platform where soldiers can hide behind them as they're shooting out, and hopefully break through the trench lines and defeat the enemy. They're huge. They move only about 4 miles per hour. The diesel engines smoke so bad and had so many issues, and would release exhaust into the cabin sometimes, and conditions were so bad and so hot within that sometimes the guys are dying of carbon monoxide poisoning, and it's really a problem, or too much carbon dioxide from the exhaust. The French develop a rapid fire machine gun, which is lightweight and doesn't jam easily, and you have the machine guns existed before this and had been used in other wars, but it's in this war that you really see the machine gun come into its own with trench warfare, where everyone is hunkered down, and if you move out into what is called no man's land, in between the trench lines, and there's a machine gun running, there's a good chance you're going to die. And it made it so that neither side wanted to leave the trench, basically ever, and kept things pretty static. And then in April of 1915, the Germans do something that is absolutely terrifying. They release poison gas, mustard gas, over the lines of the Second Battle of Ypres. And this also changes warfare. I'm not really going to get into this a lot, but mustard gas was terrifying. It gets on your skin, develops giant blisters, takes people out of the fight, it kills people, and it's just an absolute weapon of terror where you're just sitting there and all of a sudden this cloud rolls in and there's nothing you can do. And even if you're wearing a gas mask, it might keep you alive. That doesn't prevent any exposed skin from getting this on it, because it's not a gas like water vapor. It's thicker than that, and it gets everywhere, and it's sticky, and it's horrifying. And then when the wind shifts, oftentimes it would blow it right back into the German lines as well. And soldiers at the time faced terror, I believe, like in no war previous with these type of weapons. And it was every day just waiting to die. And there's a feeling of hopelessness and of incompetence in command structures on both sides, because no one's really going anywhere. And basically you're just waiting for enough people to die on one side so that the war can end. And that's basically how World War I ends. It's a very, very tragic war. The fumes cause vomiting and slow suffocation if it gets in your lungs, but it also destroys your skin and is horribly painful, etc. The Allies begin to use poison gas shortly after, so it's not just the Germans who were doing this, and gas masks become standard equipment. And unfortunately, it's still standard equipment for soldiers on the modern battlefield today. Another new weapon, the flamethrower, was created by the Germans, which I'm not really going to go into this. You can probably figure this out for yourself, but flamethrowers are terrifying. I can think of a few ways that would be more horrifically painful and destructive in a short period of time. Okay, and you see here, aircraft being developed for the first time in many different models and functions and sizes. They're trying out anything that they can think of to get into the air and bring the fight. This is a World War I era British tank. It's designed to hit trenches, go over trenches, run over barbed wire, and keep going. Doesn't have this main giant cannon like we have on modern tanks. It's designed for trench warfare, where you have things coming out the side and the front a little bit, but you're slowly moving into battle lines. Okay, here's the cutaway inside of that. So you've got this diesel engine right here that would often, leak exhaust fumes into this cabin, and it's horrible. It's terribly hot, and it was kind of a nightmare to be a tank crew. This is poison gas, going with the wind towards one of the battle lines, and that is the result. When I said that there were blisters and it's horrible for your skin, this is what happens when mustard gas touches you. It does the same thing inside of you when you breathe it. I'll leave it at that. So, for obvious reasons, gas masks become standard issue. And if you ever wondered why soldiers wear long sleeves all the time and pants, one of the reasons for that, not the only reason, but one of the reasons for that is because of things like mustard gas, where if it gets onto your skin, it has that horrible blister and chemical reaction with your skin. And so these guys would try to cover up as much as possible, along with wearing things like gas masks to save their life. And you see, they have stuff going on all the way up their neck there. Okay. We come to the Battle of Verdun. Verdun is just a tragic, tragic fight. This is kind of, well, you'll see. The Germans in 1916 come up with a plan to wipe out thousands of French and British soldiers. On the French side, the Western Front sat the city of Verdun. British High Command knew that the patriotic front would defend the town to the last man. Verdun has, significance for the French people. They begin bombarding the town on February 21st, feeling the town must be held at all costs, so French morale would not suffer. The French kept pouring men into the town. The Germans were right, and they end up winning. The French do, but the cost of life is just horrifying. It's the first massively destructive battle on the Western Front. 315,000 casualties on the French side, 280 German casualties. The city is reduced to rubble. The defender of the town, Henry Pétain, I don't know, French is hard, becomes a hero. The German commander, I believe it's Falkenhayn, was replaced by Hindenburg for his incompetence. There's a really good video on World War I and Verdun. If you have a chance, the link is below there. It's really good videos. You should go check it out. Okay. Verdun is here on the border between Belgium and France. Okay. Another thing I want to point out is this is a transition war between old style warfare and a completely different and new way to fight. Thousands and thousands of horses are brought into this fight into World War I. They didn't know from the onset that it would be trench warfare. That type of warfare had never existed before. Horses are terrible in that style of warfare, but they just didn't know, and so thousands of horses were and cavalry units were utilized during this time. And unfortunately, I know this is going to make a lot of you sad, but a lot of these horses end up dying as well as the people who are riding them. Yeah, that kind of speaks for itself. That's artillery shells fired on enemy lines. On that note, danger close for an artillery strike is about 600 meters. Might be a little less for smaller ones. Like these are smaller than a lot of modern day howitzers, but you're talking 3 to 6 football fields and you could still die from a strike. It is not like in the movies where something blows up near someone and they're okay. These people are not okay. I mean, yes, people did survive. They're in trenches, etc. A lot of them did, but these things going off were just absolutely terrifying and caused a lot of death and destruction. And this is no man's land. The place between the two trenches where you have these pools and puddles is where artillery has landed and blown up the ground, and then they're trying to run across this mud and muck as it rains, it snows. People are getting what is called trench foot, where their feet are rotting because in the trenches it's muddy and wet and you can't get your feet dry, and their feet would rot. It was just horrifying. This is the type of monument that the soldiers still use today to commemorate the dead. Oftentimes they'll use the helmet and rifle of the soldier who passed away, a close friend or something like that, and use that as a monument. So the French's big fight was the Battle of Verdun, the large-scale battle for the British is the Battle of Somme. Major French-British combined offensive, the Somme River. Verdun has drained French forces. The British would fight this one primarily. They attack July 1st, 1916. Allies begin with a huge artillery volley, hoping to cut barbed wire and destroy the concrete defenses and plow through and defeat the Germans once and for all. They used a bunch of duds, and this is one of the prime examples for where there's not a lot of confidence in the officers who are making the decisions. I mean, like, this should have really been checked by multiple people. Like, this is an unexcusable accident. After the barrage, hundreds and thousands of Tommies, British soldiers, cross no man's land to be cut down by machine guns that are not destroyed because they've been shooting duds. Within hours, the British suffer 60,000 casualties, the worst ever loss to this day in one day of a battle. I mean, we're talking one day. This is not like spread out over over a long period of time. This is like an entire football stadium of people dying in a few hours. Like, it's just horrifying. Fierce fighting continued through September. Tanks are first used in this battle. They're unreliable, slow, and too few in number to make a difference. This is technology that is just being developed. And they end up halting their useless attack, September, October, November. So this carries on for months. So it begins in July, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and then they just decide, this was a terrible idea. 600,000 Germans, 400,000 British, 200,000 French, 1.2 million casualties to gain 7 miles of territory. And this is what we're talking about. It's just a few miles in between here and there, and that's it. The land is just destroyed in between there. It's not like it's usable for anything. Wouldn't be again for quite some time. They're still finding unexploded ordnance or munitions from World War I and World War II in this area. Like, it's very dangerous still to this day as a result of these wars. Here's that same area, but from a different view. They're fighting through this marshland and through this town, etc. And we're talking a few miles. Here's a little town. Think of like a little town that you've driven through, and just the outskirts of that town on either side. And that's basically what territory was fought over months, and 1.2 million people die. In this area. It's just crazy. Okay? And then the Italian front in the south. See, remember, Italy was one of Germany and Austria's main allies. Italy does not agree with Austria's attack on Serbia. They made a secret alliance with the Triple Entente. And in exchange for switching sides, they are promised lands. In 1915, Italy attacked Austria-Hungary in the Alps. Okay, so Italy basically turns traitor in this one and attacks their former allies. They fight for 2 years, gaining almost nothing and taking huge losses. This is basically the theme for the entire war on all fronts, with the exception of some of the colonial fighting that's going on. At the end of the war, they were given some of Austria-Hungary's land. The Ottoman Empire to the south, they closed the waterway between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, called the Strait of Dardanelles. This is a super key waterway and strait, and allows for supplies to get into this region in the south, near the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it is closed off to enemies of the Ottomans, to England, and who's trying to get supplies into this area. British fought Australians and New Zealanders brought Australians and New Zealanders to fight at the Dardanelles. The Ottomans set up a bunch of aquatic mines in the water, and then in the strait on both sides they had fortifications with cannon and machine guns pointed at the strait, and so as soon as you tried to sail through, you were getting blown up from underneath as well as from either side. And so, of course, in this war, because this war was crazy, they decided to rush it a bunch of times, and 250,000 Australians and New Zealanders died without any success. Okay, summary. All battlefronts have deadlocked and failed. That's basically it. Okay, just want to show you this map. This is pre-World War I. Germany is a lot bigger than it was. This is Poland in modern day times. The Austria-Hungary here is a number of different countries, and the lines are a little bit different. Some of them are pretty much the same. Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, etc. But I mean, this is Turkey. The Ottoman Empire was still a thing back then. Yeah. Okay. So here's the southern Italian border, because Italy turns their back on and then attacks Austria. Here you have the Dardanelles, where it would be really nice to get soldiers and equipment and stuff back in here to then try and attack from behind, and it is also essential for getting supplies to the Russians in the alliance. This is that strait we're talking about. Okay, this is another view of the Italian line in the Alps here. These, I'm not going to explain topographical maps to you guys right now, but yeah, we're in the mountains. Here's the Dardanelles. Every single one of these little dots is an artillery fort, and these are all mines. So you've got fort all the way along this side, and all the way along this side, and you've got mines all the way through, and it was an absolute mess. And then submarine nets as well. I mean, yeah, they didn't succeed. There's those trade of the Dardanelles people trying to rush through and just get destroyed. Okay, we're going to stop this video there. This was a very, very long video. Hopefully you guys watch this and gain something out of it for your next exam. Thanks everyone. Bye.